Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Room for Everybody. Today, our guest is Colleen, and I am so excited for this conversation and the different things that we're about to get into. It's always fun to talk to a fellow interior designer. But before I get too much into it, Colleen, I'll pass it over to you. And I always start by asking, what are some of the identities that you hold?
I am a mom. I am a wife. I speak fluently in Spanish, so habla español. Podemos hacerlo así si quieres. I try to learn as many different languages as possible because I've traveled the world and done design in 68 different countries. And so I'm always learning. How about that? That's how I
Yeah,
identify.
that's beautiful. I love it. Let's dive a little bit into mothering and how being a parent has impacted your design and the way that you see the world.
Sure. So I am a mother of three girls, which is, interesting in itself. I came from a family of three girls. So history's kind of repeated itself. So I kind of know sort of what's coming down the pipeline, but not. My middle daughter has epilepsy. So that has been one of the biggest, I think, things I've had to learn as a mom is how to design a room that is safe for someone who could have a seizure in the middle of the night. So, like, for example, her bed is lower to the ground. So, if she did epilepsy, you have sadly, this thing called SUDEP, which is sudden unexpected death in an epileptic person. This will happen to 1 in 1,000 people because of the unsafe conditions of their bedroom where they'll have a seizure, they'll roll over. You need to make sure, or if they fall off the bed. I mean, when you're in full seizure mode, your body's not moving. So we made sure we've got a rug that's cushiony, padding. If she falls off, she would be okay. I know this is like kind of those things, but those are things you have to think about, right? You have to think about the lighting in the room. Like there cannot be flicker. So like if you buy your light bulbs from Lowe's actually has a flicker rate. They test everything, their TVs, their light bulbs, all that stuff. So I always make sure when I'm putting in lights and what have you, that we take care of that. And, it's also about strobing. So if your fans, if I'm always cognizant if your fans strobe with your lights. Have you ever walked into a room and someone's put the recessed lighting too close to the fans? You're like, how did you do that?
Yes.
That strobing effect can cause a seizure. Does that make sense?
Oh,
So
interesting.
I'm super hyper aware. Hyper aware. I think in my designs, when I'm looking at lights, when I'm looking at things does this mark the box? Because you never know. Because 1 in 26, but then 1 in 10 people can have a seizure themselves. So those are kind of the things I've learned as being a mom and a designer as far as that's concerned. And then obviously using bleach cleanable materials throughout my entire house. We had a great story. We had a babysitter. We had put perennials, which is a fabulous fabric, which is bleach cleanable, solution dyed acrylic, and it looks just like linen. And I could have white in my house, which is amazing because usually you can't have white with children.
Right.
Babysitter calls me. She's like, your daughter just literally took a spray bottle of bleach and a hose and just hosed off where the dog jumped on the sofa and it's back white. She's like, I'm sold. I'm buying this moving forward.
That's amazing.
So those type of things, as far as design, I'm always looking, the only problem with that is not sustainable. So that's the big issue is trying to find that bleach cleanable material that's also sustainable, biodegradable is kind of the next biggest thing that I think all of us are looking to do because everybody's all about these protective fabrics. And then if you look to see what goes into it, you're like, oh, would you eat that? No.
Right.
That's got so much stuff in it. So I think that's the biggest thing as a mom is when I look at things is what are we sitting on, right?
Right.
Where is this product made?
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important to know where it's made and how they make it, and who's making it and are the people that are making it, are they OSHA compliant? Those are super important for me when I'm looking at things as for design for my children as well and for my clients. I mean, that's one of the most important things I think you can do as a designers. Where do your materials come from? I don't know. What about you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely hear the tension between the function of some items, especially for cleaning things, and the sustainability aspect. There's also various items that just need to be a one-time use in spaces. And I'm like, oh, I wish there was a way to make this just a little bit more sustainable, but it's very challenging.
It is very challenging. I actually, with the solution dyed acrylic, we were during pandemic throwing them out. Like we were like, oh my gosh, we've got, you get all these samples in your library and you're like, what am I going to do with this? So there I am about to throw a dumpster full of fabrics and stuff. And we actually converted it into making handbags. And we created a company called Butte Couture, which was really cool. And it was made by women for women in the United States. And what was great is we use those bleach cleanable things as the liners. So that way, when you dump stuff in there, like as I'm a mom and a designer and had a baby bottle and it dumped in my bag, I bought myself a nice Prada when I had got to a certain limit, right? I was like,
Yeah.
yes, I bought a Prada. And then the baby bottle dumped in the Prada.
No.
I was like, now this stinks. So when we did Butte Couture, we took those samples and we did it with leather because like leather's the same thing. Like if you got samples of it, what are you going to do with it? So we did all that and we sold like 60 grand worth of bags in like 6 months. And then we gave back 10% to local women's charities. So it was like that sustainability, using things that should be thrown in the trash into making something and then giving back. I mean, I find like we as designers can definitely come up with cool things with all of that because sometimes I feel like we can sadly be some of the most wasteful people in the world. We're like, oh, just chuck that countertop. And you're like, where is that countertop actually going? So I always find that that's interesting and trying to make sure, like, where do you upcycle that? Does that make sense? Like, that's super important to me as to where that goes.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've talked a little bit about how you've designed your space and how you think about designing client spaces, but having a daughter who has epilepsy, how does that impact going to other public spaces? Like, do you have to do research and vetting?
We do. We have to, like, if we're going to certain places, we just always check, like, for example, can't go on certain field trips or she can't go to certain places because of those situations. It doesn't usually happen that often, but like, will our family, if we see like a light flicker, like, close your eyes, we've got you, we'll take you through it. You know what I mean? Like those are, and she'll feel sick. I mean, it's like if I'm going to a space that's been designed, or if you're going for like a theater or a concert, we have to check to see if there's massive flashing lights or any of those type of things. It's always on your mind for us. And most people don't think about that, but that can affect anybody, honestly. That's like if you're looking at a computer screen for too long, or even when she has her profession, like what is she going to do? Guys, when you're doing design as well, like those are things to think about. So, but yeah, normally some cases, most of the time we've been there, but if we haven't been there, her dad or I will go scout it out before we go in, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Definitely. I think I've noticed more warnings kind of at the beginning of shows and movies if there are flashing lights. And so I think that is a move in the right direction to be able to communicate.
I think people need to communicate that as well. I mean, you have more of a chance of having a seizure than you do of choking. So, and we don't talk about it, right? So if you think there's 400 million people in the United States, now divide that by 26. It's a lot of people. Divide that by 10, that's a lot of people. And we really need to be thinking about it. Now think about that also like in the workplace. Like I have almost 10 employees. So, I mean, 1 in 10 of those will have a seizure. I actually had one. I was out walking to our warehouse and stepped on the ramp. Someone had taken the stickers off that we walk up off, and I wasn't paying attention. And I had the soles of my shoes, I didn't realize, were completely worn, and I fell and knocked myself out. And then, and luckily my team hadn't left. It was like at 4:58 and they found me underneath my desk having convulsions, which was crazy. Yeah. And then I knew exactly how it was very weird because I always wanted to say, like, what is my daughter feeling? And then I went through it, and my poor team, like, came in like 3 days later with their eyes all open. Like, are you okay? I mean, I don't think they'd ever seen it. It was very eye-opening for everybody, very eye-opening for me. And it took a really, really long time to actually feel better after having that. So, you just you learn. And I think the world is not as inclusive with epilepsy, to be honest. And I think that's something that we really need to be focusing on. And a lot of neurological, honestly, that have issues with lights or those type of things is something to think about. But it doesn't, I mean, on the impact of when I'm looking at lighting for clients, for example, like there are some great companies out there that I think do a very, very good job, especially with LEDs. I think with the, now that they've incorporated the diodes the LED diode strips into the actual lights. Like there's no bulbs. They just last for 50,000 hours. I always find that, the research that they've done on it is very comprehensive when I'm looking at that type of stuff, especially if you're going to put a fixture that you're going to have to take it down eventually, get a new one in like
Right.
10 years. It is really important to make sure that the safety of all of those things.
Absolutely. Yes. Some of the things that you were saying about the bed and making sure that it's lower to the ground and like there's a soft rug made me think of some of the beds that are being designed for children with autism so that at night they can move around however they want to, but are still safe. I think that one has a little bit more of like a barrier
I've
on
heard.
either side. One's kind of like similar accommodations to ensure safety at night, no matter how your body is moving.
Well, it's like the same thing for like cribs and all of that stuff. It's always important, especially with children, to make sure, like I've seen bunk beds where you walked in and going, how does your kid sleep?
Yeah.
They're all about these custom bunk beds, right? But the problem with the custom bunk beds is they don't have also the warranty or the guarantee if your kid falls off. Like,
Right.
who checked that? I mean, we're being asked to design bunk beds all the time. And I'm always going, don't know if I want to carry the insurance on that for the rest of the life of your house. And I think people don't really realize that when they're doing that they are having to insure their design literally for the remainder of that time. If it is a fixture in the house, you have to do that. And like, you really got to think about that because people are doing like 3 or 4 on top of each other. And I'm like, what happens if that kid? So yeah, I mean, those are all things that I think about in my little, sometimes, your morbid designer like thought processes, like, how are you going to survive? Yeah, how high up that is, if that makes sense. It looks really cool, but is it actually practical?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really important aspect that designers bring into projects is having that awareness of safety and protocols and working on other projects and being able to bring that knowledge in. It's really valuable and important.
We're doing a lot of, aging in space, aging in your place, like, so when we're working with clients, they're like, well, can I get a wheelchair in here? I was like, well, then we need to really reevaluate this whole area to make sure that a wheelchair could eventually be here. Because a lot of people don't want to end up in a nursing home, to be honest. That's most of my clients. It's like their biggest fear. And so they're like, if this is their forever home, they want to be able to age in place. So, which is interesting. So then it's like, okay, well, then we need to change your showers to a linear drain. We need to make sure that the shower opens like in a certain specific way. That pocket door for that bathroom you wanted is going to have to shift completely over. And now we've changed a wall that's, structural. So now we're going to have to figure this out too. And usually they don't think about that, right? They're like, oh, a wheelchair should be able to fit. I'm like, you're not putting an airplane wheelchair in here. You're doing an actual physical one. Like, we're not going to come in with that 20-incher and be like, good luck. But I think those are all the things that I always like, we're asked, I don't know in your practice, but we're always asked that like all the time. Like, especially for like, this is their last home. And you're like, okay, how are we going to get this done? How are you going to get into your bed? So it's the same thing, like making sure that when we buy the bed, is it a platform bed? Is it low enough for you to get off the wheelchair and get in?
Definitely.
Those are things we always do.
Yeah. Do you think that nursing homes will ever be designed in a way that people want to go to them?
I think there are some senior living. So in the contract world, senior living, I think has really made some major strides. Like there's a fabulous place in Denver, North Carolina, where we thought we were at a country club and it turned out we were at a senior living place. And we were like, wow, this is actually really cool. Even my husband was like, what's the age to check in here? And I was like, David Bennett, like, don't go there. But I mean, it was that, like, it didn't, you know what I mean? Like he walked in and it was like, okay, it all depends. I mean, there's so many older senior living places out there where you just kind of walk in and you're like, okay.
Right.
But there are new places that I think that people are wanting to go where it really just feels like a higher end college, fabulous place where everybody can be. I mean, that's what I'm kind of seeing, and focusing on wellness, I think, is what's happening.
That's great. Yeah. I was thinking about, it sounds just like another college experience.
Yeah, kind of. And then making sure that you've got the right materials for that too, but I don't want to delve into that.
Okay. That's all right. I do want to touch on your international design a little bit. My
Sure.
first question, what is your favorite thing about the culture in Costa Rica? Because I remember that's where you started your first
Yeah.
business.
Well, the culture in Costa Rica is really cool. It's really like a combo of many people from Europe, a lot of people from Europe, a lot of people from actually the United States. But then the Costa Ricans are incredible, very welcoming, very like pura vida. And then it's kind of got like, it depends where you are. Like if you're at the beach and you're on the resort, it's very got that kind of Spanish beach flair. If you're in downtown San Jose, it's very modern. It's extremely modern and it's very, oh, it all depends. I mean, there's so many different styles. It's like any place else, but it's cool. I mean, sometimes you live in the land of mañana, which can be very painful when you're like, when are we getting this house built?
Yeah.
I always loved it. People from the United States were like, yeah, the house can be built in like 12 months. I'm like, try 18 to 2 years, like 18 months, 2 years, like chill. It's
Yeah.
not going to be that fast. We have a rainy season here, which is going to stop the build if we don't get under roof. But, we learned to build in cement and learned to build in the metric system, like everything was metric, which was trying to retrain my brain from, going from the English system to metric was interesting. And then coming back from metric and going back into inches was like, oh, hundreds is so much easier than anything else.
Yeah.
So, it was really cool. And then obviously speaking in Spanish the whole time was also awesome because it really helped me develop that secondary skill faster. There's so many cool architects, so many cool designers coming out there, so many amazing projects and things that I always laugh. People are like, well, how are you going to get in? Because it's more like logistics. It's like, how are you going to get this sofa from the United States to San Jose and then up on a cliff? And now it's rained and there's like mudslides and, clients like, I don't care if there's a mudslide. I want my stuff up there. So I've literally like ridden in a truck being pulled by a tractor, my furniture in the back from, coming up and you're like, ta-da, we did it. But you had no idea we had a tractor pulling your truck up here because it wasn't going to make it. But it was really cool. And we still have our store down there. It's celebrating 20 years, which is really cool.
Wow, congratulations.
So, yeah, we're excited about that. And then, it's different because like even in Nicaragua, Panama, they're all really close to, but they're totally different cultures. They're totally different ways that they've, developed as a nations. And it's just interesting to see what they like and what they don't like, right? One of the things in Latin American culture is like, we don't put skirts on a lot of the sofas just because when they have people like cleaning, they use bleach. So it's just not conducive. A lot of the times we will never put a velvet or a chenille ever in a warm, obviously not in a warm country, but those are things you learn. When I first started out in 2004, I was working for Drexel Heritage. I was a furniture rep. My first store was in Panama. And I got down there. She's like, nothing's selling. And I'm like, well, it's all gray and it's velvet. It's gray and velvet in the hottest country in probably the world. And if you don't have air con, I couldn't imagine sitting on that. I mean, ugh. And gray. There's like their culture is so colorful. So, we changed her whole floor. I was like, I hate to tell you this, but you're gonna have to like mark it down, get back what you invested in it, and then we're gonna reinvest and we're gonna do lots of color. And the minute we did that, her store started rotating like super fast. But it was really learning about, again, like looking around, seeing what that culture, what they consider to be, important to them. So like when I was in Russia, velvet is super important. Like velvet is like very like keeping you warm, seems more regal, certain colors. They're very like when this was like, 15 years back. This was before it went super modern. I mean, the thought of doing modern in Russia when I was there from 2004 to 2010 was unheard of. Like they were just like, why would you ever invest in a white sofa? And now all you see is like Roche Bobois and, super high end modern. I totally get. But when I was there, it was just like, you had to have all these very heavy, and you would switch it out. You would have a winter season and you would have a spring season, if that makes sense.
Interesting.
Which was because of how the climate change was just so incredible. St. Petersburg, I had no idea that sun doesn't go down there because I really didn't pay attention. And I went in May to go work on some projects. And I was like, it's 4:00 in the morning. And it feels like it's 2:00. I'm like, I have to get up and do another. Oh my God. But, there you're dealing with really, really old buildings, built in 14th century, 15th century. And it's like, you're working on those designs and you're going, I can't even tap a nail into this wall without, freaking out that I'm going to cause plaster damage. And it's like working with those textiles and it's really cool. And then you go to Asia and it's totally different, and Australia. I've done a lot in Sydney and Brisbane and Melbourne and bigger furniture. It was incredible. It was like the bigger, the better. Great for a while. And then you had a lot of actually Asian population coming into Australia. So then they would buy, completely different look. So it was interesting having to cater to both the Australian and kind of the Asian clientele at the same time, I always thought that was interesting. And, then you have your American personality on there and you're trying not to be uber American, like, hey, let's do this color. And they're like, that's not going to work. And it's just, I find it's just listening when I'm working with different cultures. I think that's the most important thing is to like really what works for you. Mm-hmm. And then what things do not work for you. I always ask, even with clients, when you're working with them too, it's like, what do you like and what do you not like? And how does this work within your environment? I think that's the most important thing that you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting to hear how you've kind of adapted to the different cultures and really paid attention to that and how that's influenced your design.
Well, I used to have to do Ralph Lauren. So I was the account manager and then became basically you were like the credit manager, you did the visual, you did everything. So whenever we were doing Ralph Lauren, we kind of did like Ralph Lauren a la Mexico or Ralph Lauren Japan, still giving his ethos, but also making sure that we were culturally sensitive when we put things in, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. What do you think is the most unique project you've done?
I've done one in Guatemala where we brought like a castle from Europe over in pieces. That was kind of funky. That was crazy. I've done that house on the hill where I was given pretty much like a blank check and they were like, go. And I'm like, oh, okay. What? How much do you want? You don't worry about what I'm going to spend. Okay, no problem. We've got this. I think those were like really, really cool. I think my first project that I did, my husband and I did, was probably one of my favorites, where it was like we were just getting into the business and it was like this huge house in Costa Rica. It was really cool. The owners were super cool. We were working also with the designer because the designer hired us to help as well. And it was just sourcing all of that, getting it all done. It was just really fun. I've always loved that, and I remember just walking away from that project like, wow, we just brought like 9 containers down here and nothing came damaged. Holy cow.
It's very impressive.
The next house that we did, we did not have so much luck. Yeah. You went, okay. I think we had a mirror that broke like 4 times and it took 2 years to make the mirror. So by the time we were done, it was 8 years later and her kid would already graduated college. And I was like, so smart. No, those are experiences that you have, and I'm still friends with that client too. So she's reached back out, like those type of deals. I think some of the funniest ones I've done is I've had a client be like, I want to look like Disney World. I'm like, you want me to bring Bahama grass, fake AstroTurf to your house in Costa Rica? Done. Please don't publish this anywhere. But that's one of the things. It's more your client. I really don't, at the end of the day, if that's what my client wants, I want to give, I'll make it look as best I can, but it's more for them. It's not for me. It's not, hey, this is Colleen's take on AstroTurf in Costa Rica. My client does not like grass. Okay. You don't like grass? That's fine.
Yeah. I can relate. I don't think I'd want to mow a big yard. I can understand some of that.
Yeah, it's just like, how much water does that AstroTurf take, and how do you get that off? Not my problem, What about you? What is your project that stands out most in your mind?
I feel like the project that I'm working on is always the first one in my mind, but I was helping a church in Mississippi renovate their space, and their building actually used to be like a bomb shelter. So it's like very flat roof, very thick walls.
How was the radon in there?
I don't know. But yeah, it was an interesting project. and was actually a church that my grandparents had started. So also felt like
Oh, that's
personal
really cool.
tie to it. Yeah, I'm planning or hoping to see it in November and like a more finished version. It's still not complete, but we're taking it in little steps to get it done. Yeah.
That is super cool. Congratulations on that.
Yeah,
Please send me
thank you.
pictures. I would love to see that. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it is fun. I also was curious, who are kind of your design inspiration people? Like, who are you learning from in the design world?
I think Ken Folk is really cool. I think that his ability and his team's ability to just mix things, like I've just seen the most incredible projects come out of him. We had worked with him when I was a director of contract at EJ Victor and just was like, wow, like what an incredible him, Martin Brunitsky, they do just some major, just over the top maximalism. I think that's very cool. I'm also really love Alfredo Paredes. He was the designer for Ralph Lauren, just his timeless aesthetic. So, like, his ability to make it look very iconic is he just has this incredible knack, and I just think that what he's done for the design world, I mean, he was the one behind Ralph Lauren, was incredible. I mean, how many people think of like iconic things this man has created? Like some of the top restaurants in the world he's designed it, like the Polo Bar in New York, like those type of things. He's really cool. I'm trying to think. There's Amy Waristi, she's an incredible designer in Costa Rica. I think she's a natural designer, most natural designer I've ever met. Just able to take whatever the client was on and just kind of work a little magic. And it looks like it's been there for years, and just able to take things that I would have never thought of putting together and just going, wow, that's absolutely cool. She's one of my favorites. And, also, let's see, who's the one in Brazil? Sig Bergamin, another really cool guy. Love, another maximalist, another person that could just kind of bring it all together. Very, very, very cool. And then I love the team of Mr. and Mrs. Howard. They're like in Georgia, like super, has this kind of Southern aesthetic, super light. But, I think there's all those different aesthetics. And I'm just kind of watching them because basically here where we are in North Carolina, we have all this different, but we're not just doing North Carolina, we're around the world. But, it's just kind of seeing all of those things and what they do, I find to be incredible. It's someone that takes something to like the next level where you're just going, how did you do that? And I think that's just the coolest way about it. And it's just kind of like, learning from them and seeing from them. I always love going to the markets. I think that people need to go to the markets more, like High Point, Atlanta, all those places, because you just see all these cool displays and things. And then it's kind of like a photograph in your memory of like, oh, you could totally put that together. It's totally fine. When your client's like, well, how do you know that goes together? You're like, because I've seen it.
Right.
Or like Maison Objet in Paris or Deco Off in Paris. Like, have you ever been? It's outstanding. If you ever get the chance, you need to go to Deco Off in January because it's both Maison Objet and Deco Off. And that's where you see the fabric and the other, it's a fashion week and it's all of that stuff. And it's freezing cold in Paris. No one wants to be there, but you're seeing all these cool things, and that Europe is going to be coming, like they're like 2 years ahead of us, I always say. Cause like, how Fringe is now coming back. Well, it was coming back 2 years ago. And now you're like, everybody's like, I need Fringe. And I'm like, well, I know where I saw that. I know how that looks, and then you go see all the cool new things coming down the pipeline, which I love. And it's always those type of things I always get inspired by, or just travels, just walking into a cool bookshop or a cool store or a cool hotel and going, ooh, this is really cool. And I'll always ask, who did this? Like, have you ever lifted up like the seats? I always do that. I'm like, where's this from?
I have, yes. I'm like the person flipping over the chairs.
Yeah.
I also have asked who's designed spaces before, and often they don't know, which makes me sad.
That makes me sad because, someone actually like worked really hard at that. And like, I don't know, sometimes I feel like designers aren't given any credit for all the amazing hard work they do. And they just walk in, you're like, that's pretty. Who did it? I have no idea. Okay. Well, yeah, my dad always gets embarrassed by me and my husband. Could you stop lifting up chairs? I'm like, what? I think it's cool. Or like flipping over the plate. Oh, that's cool. Those are things I always think about.
We like to know.
Well, especially from like, I have a design firm and a store. So it's like, oh, where could this go into my retail shop? Or that's pretty cool. Or that's unique. Or let's not buy that because that totally chipped.
Right. Yes. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Colleen, for your time and everything that you've shared here today. I do want to give you a chance to tell people more about the work that you're doing, where they can find you, any
Sure.
last thoughts you have.
So we are CBB Design Firm. We are based in Morganton, North Carolina. We have locations in Latin America, and we are able to do designs around the world. We do everything in 3D. So that's what we've been super known for, super famous for, is that we do it in low poly format, we do it in high poly format, and we're able to source from over 900 vendors. And when you hire us, you pretty much get wholesale plus 35%. So it's a major, major savings. If a sofa is $3,000 retail, we're going to get for $1,000. We sell it to you for $1,350 plus shipping and taxes. So it comes out very, very well. So we save our clients a lot. They can get super high-end, beautiful pieces for a great price. And we do that also now with kitchen, bath, exterior, all the building materials, windows. We've kind of become a high-end construction and design resource center as well. So that's CBB Design Firm and Mimosa Home, based in North Carolina. And you can find us on Instagram or on the web.
Yeah, I will include your link in the show notes.
Well, thank you, Enzi. This has been amazing. I've really enjoyed talking with you. And I love the fact that you have a platform about sustainability and design and inclusivity. I think, it's something that needs to be talked about and something that needs to be done more often.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Hello, dear listener. Thank you for tuning in for another episode. This podcast is produced by Eden Environments, an inclusive and sustainable interior design firm. Our human-centric design strategy creates spaces that are fat and neurodivergent friendly, trauma-informed, and sustainable. If that sounds like what you need, contact me through Eden's website to get started. For the latest updates, sign up for emails and follow along on your favorite social media platform. And until we meet again, I wish you gentle days.